They thought it was mercy. But when the juvenile worm escaped the hydroponics dome, everything changed. Cornered, and against Shaw's orders, Corporal Novak used non-lethal methods as Dr. Reyes insisted. The sedated creature lay vulnerable when the adult worm appeared overhead, not attacking, but communicating. In that breathless moment, predator became protector, forever changing humanity's understanding of alien intelligence. The emergency klaxon wailed through Research Dome 3, its piercing cry rebounding off curved walls that had once felt secure. Dr. Elena Reyes gripped her tablet as the overhead lights flickered, threatening to plunge the laboratory into darkness. Through the skylight, Vesta 9's barren surface stretched like a jagged obsidian sea, beautiful in its desolation, deadly in its isolation. "Status report," she demanded into her comm unit, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. 6 months on this moon, and this was their third breach in 14 days. Static crackled before Captain Marcus Shaw's terse reply came through. "Perimeter sensors triggered at Sector 7. Something big. Tore through the maintenance access panel like it was tissue paper." Elena closed her eyes briefly. The supply drone footage from last week still haunted her. Something massive and scaled, moving with impossible grace for its size, disappearing into the shadows before the camera could capture more than a fleeting impression. "Casualties?" she asked, already moving toward the emergency gear locker. "None yet, but we've lost contact with the solar array crew. Novak's team is en route." Elena grabbed her environment suit. "I'm coming out." "Negative, Dr. Reyes. Protocol." "Protocol be damned. Marcus, if it's what I think it is, your team needs me there." She ended the transmission before he could argue further. As the senior xenobiologist on Vesta 9, Elena had spent 3 years studying fragmented records of the moon's elusive apex predator, what the first survey team had nicknamed the Vesta worm before their abrupt evacuation. No one had captured more than grainy footage or scattered scale samples. If this was truly a worm, it would be the scientific discovery of the decade. And if Shaw's trigger-happy security team got to it first, they'd have nothing but a corpse to study. The journey through the connecting tunnels to the perimeter was a blur of emergency lighting and the hiss of her suit's oxygen recyclers. When Elena emerged onto the surface, the stark beauty of Vesta 9 momentarily took her breath away, as it always did. Twin gas giants loomed in the sky, casting an eerie blue-green glow across basalt plains. The reduced gravity made her steps lighter, but the thick environment suit reminded her that humans remained unwelcome guests here. Corporal Tia Novak spotted her first, her compact frame somehow imposing despite her stature. The security specialist's expression was hidden behind her helmet visor, but her posture conveyed disapproval. "Dr. Reyes," Novak said. "Captain Shaw ordered civilian personnel to remain in the research dome." "And I overrode him," Elena replied, scanning the horizon. "Where did it breach?" Novak hesitated, then pointed toward the solar array, a sprawling field of collectors that powered the entire outpost. Even from this distance, Elena could see the damage. Several panels mangled, their reflective surfaces shattered. "The array's offline," Novak explained. "We're on backup power, 72 hours before life support becomes critical." Elena nodded, her mind racing. "The damage pattern, it's not random destruction. It's systematic." "You're saying it's intelligent?" Novak's voice carried a note of skepticism. "I'm saying it knew exactly where to hit us." Elena activated her tablet, pulling up thermal scans of the area. "Where's the rest of your team?" "Securing the perimeter. Captain Shaw is—" A burst of static interrupted her, followed by Shaw's voice, tight with tension. "All units, converge on the western ridge. We've got eyes on the target." Elena's heart leaped into her throat. "Don't engage!" she shouted into her comm. "Shaw, do you hear me? Observation only." But the channel had already gone silent. Elena broke into a run. the reduced gravity making her bounds seem almost dreamlike despite the urgency. Novak kept pace easily, her training evident in her efficient movement. They crested the ridge in time to see 5 armed personnel in formation. Weapons trained on a massive depression in the basalt field, a natural cave formation, partially collapsed. Shaw stood at point, his posture rigid. "Hold your fire," Elena called out, her voice carrying across the comm channel. Shaw turned, his frustration visible even through his visor. "Dr. Reyes, you are in direct violation of safety protocols. And you're about to destroy potentially the most significant xenobiological specimen discovered in the past 50 years, she countered, approaching cautiously. "What have you seen?" For a moment, she thought he might order her forcibly removed, but military discipline won out. Movement inside the cave, large, at least 4 meters long. Serpentine body structure, but with limbs. Some kind of armored hide. Elena felt a surge of excitement that she carefully contained. "The Vesta worm. It's real." "It's a threat," Shaw corrected. "It's disabled our power supply and potentially killed 2 technicians." "We don't know that," Elena said, activating her scanner. "Let me approach. I need readings." "Absolutely not." "Captain, with all due respect, if we lose power completely, we lose our evac beacons. Earth Command won't send a rescue without confirmation signals. We need to understand this creature, not just eliminate it." Shaw's silence spoke volumes, but Elena could see the calculation in his eyes. She pressed her advantage. "Give me 15 minutes with Corporal Novak as security. If the technicians are in there, alive or—" She swallowed. "Otherwise, we'll know, and we'll have data on our aggressor." After what felt like an eternity, Shaw nodded once. 15 minutes. Novak, keep her alive. The rest of you, maintain perimeter and be ready to extract them, or neutralize the threat." Novak checked her weapon, a high-powered stun rifle that could drop a creature 3 times her size. "Stay behind me, Doctor." Together, they approached the cave entrance. Elena's scanner hummed, collecting atmospheric data and searching for life signs. As they drew closer, she noticed something odd about the rock formations surrounding the entrance. They were too regular, too patterned. "Wait," she whispered, crouching to examine what she'd initially thought was natural basalt. "These are manipulated. Tool marks." Novak peered at the stone. "You think it built this?" "Or modified it." Elena ran her gloved hand over the surface. "Intelligence far beyond what we expected." A low, rumbling sound echoed from the darkness ahead, vibrating through the ground beneath them. Novak raised her rifle instinctively. "Life signs?" she asked, voice steady. Elena checked her scanner. 3 distinct signatures, 2 human, faint but present, and 1. She stared at the readings in disbelief. 1 massive signature, unlike anything in our database. Hope surged within her. The technicians may be alive. They proceeded deeper, helmet lights cutting through darkness that seemed to swallow their beams. The cave widened into a chamber, its ceiling lost in shadows above. And there, against the far wall, Elena saw them, the 2 missing technicians, unconscious but breathing, their environment suits intact. "Shaw," Novak reported quietly. "We've located Moreno and Khatri, alive, status unknown." But Elena barely heard her. Her attention was fixed on what lay beside the technicians, a massive pile of supplies, neatly arranged, food containers, equipment, even medical supplies from the last drone shipment, all organized with clear purpose. "It's been collecting," she breathed. "Doctor," Novak's voice had an edge of warning. "We need to extract the technicians and leave. Now." Elena nodded, but as they moved toward the unconscious crew members, her light caught something else. A depression in the cave floor, lined with material that looked suspiciously like the insulation from their habitat domes. and nestled within it, three large, iridescent objects. "Eggs," Elena whispered, awe overriding caution as she stepped closer. The rumbling sound returned, louder this time, resolving into a growl that Elena felt in her bones. Novak grabbed her arm, pulling her back as a massive shape detached itself from the ceiling. The Vesta worm descended with surprising grace, its body a rippling mass of muscle beneath overlapping scales that shimmered with bioluminescent patterns. 6 limbs, not the 4 they'd theorized, extended from its serpentine frame, ending in claws that could easily tear through reinforced steel. But it was the head that held Elena transfixed, a wedge-shaped skull with intelligence burning in eyes that reflected their helmet lights back at them. "Don't move," Elena breathed. The creature lowered itself between them and the eggs, its posture unmistakably protective. It made no move to attack, simply watching them with those unnervingly aware eyes. "Shaw," Novak subvocalized into her comm. "We have visual confirmation of the target. It's guarding what appears to be a nest." "Pull back immediately," came Shaw's tense reply. "We're initiating containment protocol." "No," Elena hissed. "It's not aggressive, it's protective. Look at the technicians, they're unharmed." "That's an order, Corporal." Shaw's voice brooked no argument. Novak hesitated, clearly torn between duty and the strange tableau before them. "Sir, Dr. Reyes may have a point. The creature has had ample opportunity to harm us, or the technicians. It appears to be waiting." The worm shifted, one massive limb reaching out, not toward them, but toward the pile of supplies. With surprising delicacy, it selected a container of nutrient paste from the medical supplies and placed it near the unconscious technicians. "It's not hunting," Elena realized aloud. "It's caring for them." "Or keeping them as food," Novak countered, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. "No. Look at their suits. Intact. No signs of injury. And the supplies. It's been bringing them things humans use." Elena's mind raced. "I think it's trying to help." "That's a massive leap, Doctor." "Is it? We've assumed predatory intent because it's large and unfamiliar. But what if—" A crackling explosion from outside interrupted her, followed by the distinctive whine of energy weapons. The worm reared up, its bioluminescent patterns flaring in what Elena instinctively recognized as alarm. "Shaw, what are you doing?" Novak demanded into her comm. "Neutralizing the threat," came the grim reply. "Extraction team moving in." The worm's attention snapped to the cave entrance, its body coiling as if to strike. Elena made a split-second decision. She stepped forward, placing herself between the creature and the entrance. "Dr. Reyes!" Novak hissed in alarm. "It won't hurt me," Elena said with more confidence than she felt. "But if Shaw's team comes in shooting, we'll lose any chance of understanding it." The worm regarded her with those intelligent eyes, its massive head tilting slightly. Elena removed her helmet, a dangerous move in the thin atmosphere. But she needed the creature to see her face, to recognize her as different from the armed threats outside. "We mean no harm," she said, knowing the words themselves were meaningless to the creature, but hoping her tone and posture conveyed her intent. "We can coexist." The worm's luminescent patterns shifted, pulsing in a rhythm that seemed almost hypnotic. It lowered its head until it was level with Elena's exposed face, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from its body. Her lungs began to burn from the thin air, but she held her ground. Behind her, Novak stood frozen, weapon half raised but not firing. "Doctor," she whispered, "please put your helmet back on." The sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the tunnel. The worm's head snapped up, its patterns shifting to a rapid, angry pulse. Elena knew they had seconds before the situation exploded into violence. "Novak," she gasped, her vision beginning to blur from oxygen deprivation. "Tell them to stand down." Whether it was the desperation in her voice or something else entirely, Novak made her choice. She stepped forward, placing herself beside Elena, and raised her comm. "Captain Shaw, hold position," she ordered with all the authority she could muster. "The situation is under control. The creature is non-hostile. Repeat, non-hostile." "Corporal, that's not your call," Shaw's voice crackled back. "Sir, with respect, I'm the one standing 2 meters from it without a helmet, and it hasn't attacked. Dr. Reyes is right. This isn't what we thought." A tense silence followed. Elena replaced her helmet, drawing in desperate breaths of recycled air as her vision cleared. The worm watched this process with obvious curiosity, its head tilting to follow her movements. Finally, Shaw's voice returned. "You have 5 minutes to prove your theory, Doctor. After that, we do this my way." Elena nodded to Novak in gratitude, then turned back to the worm. 5 minutes to establish first contact with an intelligent alien species. No pressure. She approached the nest slowly, stopping whenever the creature's patterns intensified. The eggs were beautiful up close, their surfaces swirling with the same bioluminescent patterns as the adult, but in softer hues. One of them had a thin crack running along its surface. "It's close to hatching," she murmured. The worm made a soft trilling sound, its attention divided between Elena and the approaching footsteps that had paused at the cave entrance. An idea formed in Elena's mind. Risky, potentially disastrous, but the only bridge she could think to build in the time they had. She activated her tablet and pulled up the colony's supply manifest. "Novak, what does your team use to tag and track wildlife specimens?" "Non-invasive biomarkers," Novak replied cautiously. "Why?" "Because I think our friend here has been watching us longer than we've been watching it. It knows we catalog and study local fauna." Elena tapped at her screen. "It brought us supplies. What if we show it that we can provide something it needs?" Understanding dawned in Novak's eyes. "The eggs. They're exposed here." "Exactly. Our habitat domes maintain consistent temperature and humidity." Elena pulled up the specifications for the research terrarium in Dome 3. "We could offer safe incubation." "That's your plan? Invite it home with us?" "No. Offer to care for one of its young. A gesture of trust." Elena met Novak's incredulous stare. "Look, it's intelligent enough to recognize that we're not from here. It's been studying us, probably trying to communicate in the only way it knows how." Novak glanced at the cave entrance where Shaw and his team waited. "That's a huge gamble, Doctor." "So is opening fire on a creature we barely understand." After a moment's hesitation, Novak nodded. "Tell me what you need." Elena turned back to the worm, which had been watching their exchange with evident interest. She pulled up an image of the research terrarium on her tablet, a climate-controlled enclosure designed for alien flora and fauna samples, and slowly held it out. The worm's head moved closer, eyes focusing on the screen with unmistakable comprehension. Elena swiped to show the terrarium's current occupants, small reptilian creatures native to Vesta 9's southern hemisphere, thriving in the controlled environment. "We can help," Elena said softly, then pointed to the cracked egg. "Safety, protection." The worm's patterns pulsed slowly, almost thoughtfully. It looked from the tablet to Elena, then to the eggs, then back to Elena. With deliberate movements, it reached one clawed limb toward the cracked egg. Elena held her breath, heart hammering in her chest. If she'd misunderstood, if the creature perceived this as a threat to its offspring. But the worm gently, carefully picked up the egg, cradling it against its scaled body. Then, to Elena's astonishment, it extended the egg toward her. "Shaw!" Novak's voice was hushed with wonder. "You need to see this." The standoff at the cave entrance broke as Shaw cautiously entered, weapon lowered but ready. His stride faltered as he took in the scene, Elena and Novak standing unharmed before the massive predator that was, impossibly, offering them one of its eggs. "What in God's name?" he breathed. "First contact, Captain," Elena said, unable to keep the emotion from her voice. "It understands cooperation." Shaw's military training warred visibly with the unprecedented situation before him. "The technicians," he finally said, nodding toward the still unconscious figures. "I believe it was keeping them safe until they woke up," Elena explained. "It's been collecting our supplies, learning about us." "Or hoarding resources," Shaw countered, but with less conviction than before. The worm trilled again, more insistently. The egg still extended toward Elena. Time was running out, both for the hatching egg and for Shaw's patience. "Captain," Elena said, "I need your trust, right now." Shaw studied her for a long moment. Then the worm. Then the egg. Finally, he lowered his weapon completely. "What do you need?" "An incubation transport from the research dome," she said immediately. "And your word that no one fires unless I give the order." Shaw's eyebrows rose at her presumption of command, but he nodded. "Granted, for now." The next hour passed in a blur of careful negotiation, not with words, but with actions. The incubation transport was brought, its climate controls adjusted to match the conditions in the cave. The worm watched every move with keen attention, its patterns shifting in what Elena began to recognize as emotional states: curiosity, concern, caution. When Elena finally accepted the egg, cradling it in the specialized container with reverence, the worm's patterns settled into a steady, calm rhythm. It made no move to stop them as they retrieved the technicians, who were beginning to stir, disoriented but unharmed. As they prepared to depart, Elena paused at the cave entrance, looking back at the magnificent creature that had upended everything they thought they knew about Vesta 9. The worm had returned to its remaining eggs, coiled protectively around them, but its gaze remained fixed on Elena and the container in her arms. "We'll take care of it," she promised, knowing the words meant nothing but hoping the sentiment somehow crossed the vast gulf between their species. The worm dipped its head in a motion that seemed almost like acknowledgement. The journey back to the research dome was tense but uneventful. The technicians, once awakened, reported nothing but confusion. They remembered the solar array failure, then something large moving them to safety before they lost consciousness. No violence, no aggression. In the research dome, Elena worked feverishly to prepare the terrarium, adjusting every parameter to match the conditions she'd recorded in the cave. The egg was placed on a bed of the same insulating material she'd observed in the nest, its progress monitored by every sensor at her disposal. "You really think this will work?" Shaw asked, watching from the doorway, his expression unreadable. Elena looked up from her work. "I think we have to try. This creature, this species, it's not the mindless predator we feared. It's intelligent, curious, possibly even empathetic. Or it's manipulating us for its own purposes," Shaw countered, "playing on our scientific curiosity. That would require an even higher level of intelligence than I'm suggesting," Elena pointed out. "Either way, we're dealing with something remarkable." Shaw sighed, rubbing his temples. "Earth Command won't like this. The protocols for potentially dangerous fauna are clear." "The protocols were written by people who've never set foot on this moon," Elena said firmly. "We're here. We've seen what this creature is capable of. And right now, we're holding its child." "That's what worries me," Shaw muttered. An alarm from Elena's monitoring equipment cut off her response. The egg's movements had intensified, the crack widening visibly. Shaw instinctively stepped forward, hand moving to his sidearm. "Don't," Elena warned. "This is exactly what's supposed to happen." The egg rocked violently, the crack spreading until the shell began to split apart. A small, clawed limb emerged, then another, pushing against the constraining shell until, with a final heave, it broke free entirely. The juvenile worm was beautiful, no larger than a house cat, its scales gleaming with the same bioluminescent patterns as its parent, but in vivid blues and greens rather than the adult's deeper hues. It blinked large, intelligent eyes at them, making a soft chirping sound that tugged at something primal in Elena's chest. "Welcome to the world, little one," she whispered. The hatchling took its first unsteady steps, exploring the boundaries of the terrarium with evident curiosity. When it reached the transparent barrier separating it from the humans, it pressed one tiny limb against the surface, head tilting in an eerily familiar gesture. Shaw stared, momentarily speechless. "It looks harmless," Elena suggested. "I was going to say aware," Shaw admitted. "Like it knows exactly where it is, and who we are." Elena nodded, her scientific objectivity warring with the surge of protective feeling the tiny creature inspired. "It probably does, in some capacity. The adult's behavior suggests advanced cognitive abilities. It's likely the young are born with significant innate intelligence." As if to prove her point, the hatchling began examining the terrarium's features, testing the water source, investigating the heating elements with careful touches of its clawed limbs. "What happens now?" Shaw asked quietly. Elena had been asking herself the same question since they'd left the cave. "We learn, we observe, we try to communicate, and we prepare for the possibility that the adult may come looking for its offspring." "You think it'll attack the colony?" "I think," Elena said carefully, "that we've been given an opportunity for something unprecedented. If the adult wanted to destroy us, it could have done so already. Instead, it entrusted us with its child." Shaw's response was cut off by a commotion from the corridor outside. Novak burst in, her normally composed demeanor shaken. "Captain, Doctor, you need to see this." They followed her to the dome's main observation platform, where a crowd had already gathered. Through the transparent ceiling panels, they could see a dark shape moving across Vesta 9's barren landscape, massive, sinuous, and heading directly toward the colony. "It followed us," someone whispered. Shaw immediately began issuing orders. "Security teams to defensive positions. Power up the shield generators." "Wait," Elena interrupted, stepping closer to the observation panel. "Look at its movement pattern. It's not charging or stalking. It's approaching." The worm's progress was indeed deliberate, but non-aggressive. As it drew nearer, they could see its luminescent patterns flowing in the same calm rhythm Elena had observed when they'd departed the cave. It stopped just short of the perimeter sensors, its massive head raised toward the dome where they stood watching. "It knows we're here," Novak murmured. "It can see us." "It's looking for its offspring," Elena said with certainty. She turned to Shaw. "Captain, I need the terrarium moved here, immediately." Shaw hesitated only briefly before nodding to Novak. "Make it happen." Minutes later, the terrarium containing the hatchling was carefully positioned where the adult worm could see it through the dome's transparent panels. The juvenile immediately became agitated, pressing against the barrier, its patterns flaring in bright pulses that seemed to reach out toward the massive shape beyond the dome. The adult worm moved closer, ignoring the warning klaxons triggered by its proximity to the perimeter. It raised itself up, towering over the human structure, bringing its head level with the observation platform. For a breathless moment, humans and alien predator regarded each other through nothing but a few layers of transparent material designed to withstand vacuum, not the impact of a determined creature of this size. Then, slowly, deliberately, the adult worm lowered its head, touching its snout to the dome, directly over where the juvenile rested in its enclosure. The hatchling mirrored the gesture, reaching up as far as it could, its tiny form vibrating with excitement. "It's not attacking," Shaw said, disbelief evident in his voice. "It's visiting." Elena felt tears pricking at her eyes. "Family bonds," she whispered. "It's checking on its child." The assembled colonists watched in stunned silence as the massive creature maintained the gentle contact for several minutes. Then, with equal deliberation, it withdrew, settling into a coiled position just beyond the perimeter, not leaving, but not threatening. "It's staying," Novak observed. "Keeping watch," Elena agreed, "making sure we honor our side of the bargain." Shaw's expression had shifted from wariness to something approaching wonder. "I need to report this to Earth Command. This changes everything." Over the days that followed, the colony adjusted to their unusual guardian. The adult worm established a regular pattern, approaching the dome at dawn and dusk, communing with its offspring through the barrier, then returning to patrol the perimeter. More remarkably, other colonists reported seeing it drive off smaller predators that had previously plagued their excursions. In the research dome, Elena worked tirelessly to understand their new companion, the juvenile, which she had reluctantly catalogued as hostile wildlife specimen, Suera 1, in her official reports, but privately thought of as Ember for its glowing scales. Displayed intelligence that challenged every assumption about alien fauna. It learned to respond to simple commands within days. It recognized individual humans by the end of the week. And most incredibly, it began attempting to mimic their speech patterns, not with words, but with complex vocalizations that match the cadence and tone of human conversation. "It's trying to talk to us," Elena explained to Shaw during one of his increasingly frequent visits to the research dome. "Not just communicate. Actually speak our language." Shaw watched as Ember followed a series of gestures from Novak, who had unexpectedly become the creature's favorite human, after Elena herself. Could it succeed? "I don't know," Elena admitted. "Its vocal apparatus is entirely different from ours. But the fact that it's trying..." "Captain, we're witnessing something revolutionary here. A completely alien intelligence that wants to bridge the gap between our species." Shaw nodded slowly. "Earth Command is conflicted. Half the board wants to evacuate us immediately. The other half wants to send a research fleet." He paused. "I've been authorized to make the final determination based on my assessment of the threat level." Elena held her breath. Despite the growing acceptance among the colonists, Shaw's military training made him naturally cautious. If he deemed the worms too dangerous... "I've decided to recommend continued research," he said finally, "with expanded resources and personnel, assuming you're willing to lead the project. Dr. Reyes." Relief flooded through her. "Of course. Thank you, Captain." "Don't thank me yet," he warned. "There are conditions. The juvenile stays contained, and we establish clear security protocols for interaction with the adult. And at the first sign of aggressive behavior..." "Understood," Elena agreed quickly. "But I don't believe it will come to that. Not if we approach this with the same curiosity and respect they've shown us." Shaw raised an eyebrow. "Respect? From a predator?" "The most dangerous predator on this moon is us, Captain," Elena said quietly. "We arrived armed and ready to destroy anything we didn't understand. The worm approached with curiosity and, when threatened, chose cooperation over violence. Which species is truly showing more evolved behavior?" Before Shaw could respond, an alarm sounded. Not the perimeter breach warning they'd grown accustomed to, but the colony-wide emergency signal. Novak burst into the lab, her expression grim. "Meteor shower," she reported tersely. "A big one, coming in fast. Dome integrity at risk." Shaw was immediately in command mode. "Evacuation protocol. All personnel to the emergency shelters." Elena looked at Ember, who had become agitated at the alarm, its patterns flashing in distress. "What about..." "Bring it," Shaw said without hesitation. "If it's as intelligent as you claim. We can't leave it here to die." The emergency shelters were located beneath the colony's main structures, reinforced bunkers designed to withstand the worst Vesta 9 could throw at them. As colonists streamed into the underground complex, Elena carefully transported Ember's terrarium, the juvenile watching the proceedings with evident concern. The first impacts came before they'd fully sealed the bunker doors, distant booms that shook the ground beneath them, followed by the unmistakable sound of breaking glass and tearing metal. Dome 3 is breached, someone reported. Dome 1 holding Dome 2. There was a pause. Dome 2 is gone. Elena felt sick. Dome 2 had housed their hydroponics setup. Without it, their food supply was critically endangered. But worse, the adult worm had been near that dome during its evening patrol. "What about the perimeter?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The communications officer shook his head. "Sensors offline. We're blind until this passes." The bombardment continued for nearly an hour, each impact sending tremors through the shelter. When it finally ceased, the silence felt almost as oppressive as the noise had been. Shaw organized survey teams to assess the damage, ordering everyone else to remain in the shelter until they confirmed it was safe to emerge. Elena stayed with Ember, who had grown increasingly distressed as the bombardment continued. Now, with the silence, it paced its enclosure, patterns pulsing in what Elena had come to recognize as anxiety. "It's worried about its parent," she realized aloud. Novak, who had remained behind as security for the shelter, nodded. "Wouldn't you be?" Hours passed before Shaw's team returned, their expressions grim. The damage was extensive. 2 domes completely destroyed, the third severely compromised. Life support systems were failing, communications with Earth disrupted. "We've got maybe 48 hours before we need to evacuate," Shaw reported to the assembled colonists. "The emergency shuttle can take 20 people. We're 37. A heavy silence fell as the implications sank in. Then someone asked, "What about the worm, the adult one?" Shaw shook his head. "No sign of it, given the intensity of the impacts near its last known position." He didn't need to finish. Elena felt a pang of grief that surprised her with its intensity. Ember seemed to sense the shift in mood, its patterns dimming to muted blues and purples. "We should begin preparations for evacuation," Shaw continued. "Essential personnel and research first." He was interrupted by a commotion at the shelter entrance. A security officer burst in, breathing hard. "Captain, you need to see this. Now." They emerged from the shelter into a landscape transformed. Where Dome 2 had stood was nothing but twisted metal and shattered glass. Dome 3 listed dangerously, its structure compromised. But it was what lay beyond the ruined perimeter that had the survey team transfixed. The adult worm was alive, injured, its luminescent patterns flickering erratically in places, but very much alive. And it was not alone. 3 more of its kind worked alongside it, their massive limbs clearing debris from what had been the colony's landing pad. As they watched, one of the creatures carefully lifted a section of fallen solar array, setting it aside with precision that belied its enormous size. "They're helping us," Novak whispered. Elena felt a surge of vindication, quickly tempered by concern for the injured adult, Ember's parent, she was certain, which moved more slowly than its companions, dark fluid seeping from wounds along its flank. "It brought others," Shaw said, his military bearing momentarily forgotten in shock. "It called for help, not for itself, but for us." The implications were staggering. Not just intelligence, but social structures, communication across distances, coordinated effort, and most incredibly, empathy that extended beyond their own species. As they watched, the injured worm turned toward the shelter entrance, its patterns brightening when it spotted the humans. With deliberate movements, it approached, stopping a respectful distance away. The other worms paused in their work, watching. Elena stepped forward, Ember's portable enclosure in her arms. The juvenile became immediately animated, its patterns flaring in recognition and joy. The adult dipped its head in acknowledgement, then, to everyone's astonishment, used one clawed limb to gesture toward the devastated colony, then back toward the distant ridge where its cave lay. "Is it offering shelter?" Novak asked incredulously. Elena felt certain it was more than that. "It's offering alliance," she said. "Cooperation for mutual survival." Shaw studied the creatures with new eyes, not as threats to be contained, but as potential partners in a hostile environment. "Can we trust them?" Elena met his gaze steadily. "They trusted us with their child," she reminded him. "Now they're asking if we'll trust them with ours." It was a moment of decision that would reshape humanity's approach to alien life for generations to come. Shaw looked from the waiting worms to his battered colony, to the faces of the people who had followed him to this distant moon. Then, with the simple dignity of a leader who recognizes a better path, he nodded. "Prepare the colonists for relocation," he ordered, "and inform Earth Command that we're establishing a joint habitation protocol with the indigenous sentient species of Vesta 9. The following weeks tested every assumption, protocol, and prejudice the colonists had brought with them from Earth. The worm cave system, which proved to be an extensive network rather than a single den, offered natural protection from Vesta 9's harsh environment. With human technology to supplement its natural features, it became a viable emergency habitat. More remarkably, the worms proved to be not just intelligent, but innovative partners. They revealed hunting grounds rich with resources the humans had never discovered, helped repair salvageable equipment with strength no machine could match, and demonstrated an understanding of Vesta 9's treacherous weather patterns that saved lives during subsequent meteor showers. Ember thrived in this new arrangement, dividing its time between human researchers and its own kind. It grew rapidly, its intelligence developing in ways that challenged Elena's most optimistic projections. Most significantly, it began to serve as a bridge between species, creating a rudimentary but functional communication system of gestures, vocalizations, and luminescent patterns that both humans and worms could understand. 3 months after the meteor shower, Elena stood at the entrance to what the colonists now called Union Cave, watching as humans and worms worked side by side to install a new communications array. The contrast between the massive, scaled creatures and the suited human figures should have been jarring. Yet somehow it felt right, complementary species adapting to each other's presence, each offering strengths the other lacked. Shaw joined her, his expression thoughtful. "Earth Command has officially classified the worms as non-hostile sentient indigenous life," he reported. "They're sending a xenolinguistics team on the next transport." Elena smiled. "About time." "They're also implementing your first approach protocol colony-wide?" There was a note of pride in his voice. Compassion before containment, understanding before action. "It's just common sense," Elena said, though she couldn't suppress a surge of satisfaction. Fear is a luxury frontier explorers can't afford. We need to recognize potential allies wherever we find them. "Even when they come with claws and teeth?" Shaw asked wryly. "Especially then," Elena replied, watching as one of the worms carefully adjusted a delicate component with limbs that could crush steel, but chose instead to create. The most dangerous predators aren't always the ones that look frightening. A familiar trilling sound announced Ember's approach. No longer small enough for a terrarium, the juvenile worm had grown to the size of a large dog, its patterns more complex and nuanced than ever. It moved with the easy confidence of a creature comfortable in both worlds, greeting Elena with a gentle bump of its head against her shoulder, before acknowledging Shaw with a respectful dip of its head. "Hello, troublemaker," Elena said fondly, running her hand along the smooth scales of its neck. "What have you been up to?" In response, Ember's patterns shifted into the sequence they'd established to mean discovery, or something new. It turned, clearly wanting them to follow, leading them deeper into the cave system to an area the colonists had designated as the worm's private domain. There, in a chamber lit by bioluminescent fungi that the worms cultivated with surprising sophistication, they found the adult that had first approached their colony, now fully healed, its patterns glowing with vibrant health. Beside it lay a fresh nest, and within that nest, 5 new eggs gleamed with swirling patterns of light. A second clutch, Elena breathed, amazed. The worm's reproductive cycle had been theoretical until now, with only fossilized egg fragments and the single live specimen they'd observed to go on. Ember chirped, patterns shifting in clear pride as it approached the nest. The adult, which the colonists had named Sovereign in their informal records, acknowledged them with a dignified nod, then did something unprecedented. It carefully selected one of the eggs and extended it toward them, just as it had done months ago in that first encounter. The message was unmistakable. "It wants us to take another egg?" Shaw asked, though the answer was obvious. "Not take," Elena corrected softly. "Share. Raise together." She met Sovereign's intelligent gaze. "It's offering us family." The word felt right in a way that transcended scientific terminology. What had begun as a tense standoff between presumed predator and prey had evolved into something far more profound. 2 intelligent species recognizing in each other not just useful allies, but kindred spirits navigating a harsh universe. "Dr. Reyes," Shaw said formally, "I believe you should accept on behalf of the colony." Elena stepped forward, feeling the weight of the moment as she carefully received the egg. Sovereign's patterns pulsed in approval, and around them, other worms who had gathered to witness the exchange trilled in what could only be described as celebration. "We should document this for Earth Command," Shaw murmured. But there was emotion in his voice that had nothing to do with official reports. "We will," Elena assured him. "But first," she cradled the egg, feeling the faint vibrations of the life within. "First, we welcome our newest colonist." Later, as they prepared the incubation chamber for the new egg, Elena found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. From fear to understanding, from presumed threat to proven ally, each step had required someone to choose mercy over security, compassion over protocol. "You know," Shaw said, interrupting her thoughts, "when I took this assignment, I thought the biggest danger would be the environment itself. Never imagined I'd end up co-parenting with an alien species." Elena laughed. "Is that what we're doing? Co-parenting?" "What would you call it?" he challenged, gesturing to where Ember sat beside the incubation chamber, its patterns flowing in soothing rhythms directed at the egg within. Elena considered the question. "Evolution," she decided. "Not biological, but social. 2 species adapting to each other, creating something neither could achieve alone." Shaw nodded slowly. "I can live with that." He paused, watching as Ember adjusted the chamber's settings with careful precision. "You know, I always thought if we encountered intelligent alien life, it would be some advanced civilization with spaceships and technology. Never expected it to be a local predator that turned out to be smarter than we gave it credit for?" Elena finished for him. "Maybe that's the lesson here. Intelligence doesn't always look how we expect it to. Neither does friendship." Outside the research dome, rebuilt stronger and more resilient with worm assistance, Vesta 9's harsh landscape stretched toward the horizon. But where once Elena had seen only desolation and danger, she now recognized something else. Possibility. Not just for survival, but for connection across the seemingly unbridgeable gulf between different evolutionary paths. When the new egg hatched 3 weeks later, both humans and worms gathered to witness the event. The hatchling emerged into a world unlike anything its ancestors had known. One where it would grow up with two species to learn from, two traditions to inherit, two kinds of family to belong to. The colony officially recorded the event with scientific precision. Draconis amicus specimen, Guasuro 2. Viable emergence at 0742 colony, standard time. But in the privacy of her personal log, Elena wrote something different. Today we witnessed not just a birth, but a beginning. What started as an act of mercy, a moment when we chose understanding over fear, has blossomed into genuine kinship between species. The predator we once dreaded is now our most valued ally, our teacher, our friend. And perhaps that's the greatest discovery of all, that compassion, extended even when it seems naive, can transform the universe more profoundly than any technology we might invent. Outside her window, Sovereign raised its massive head toward the stars, luminescent patterns flowing like thoughts made visible across its scales. Ember sat beside Elena, watching its parent with evident pride, and nestled between them, the newest hatchling took its first steps into a world where boundaries between species had begun to dissolve. They had come to Vesta 9 seeking knowledge, resources, conquest of a harsh frontier. They had found something far more precious, a new definition of family that spanned the stars. In official reports to Earth Command, Shaw had designated the worms as native sentient allies. But among the colonists, they had earned a different title, one that acknowledged the journey from fear to friendship, from threat to protector. They were no longer predators, they were partners.